There is a moment that happens to almost everyone, but almost no one stops to examine it. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with warning or explanation. It simply appears, quietly, completely, already finished by the time you notice it. A memory, not one you were trying to recall, not one connected to anything that just happened. It emerges on its own, fully formed. You can see it clearly. Not as an idea, but as a place, a real place, a hallway maybe, or a street at night. You can see the way the light falls across the ground. You can feel the position of your body inside it. You know where you were standing. You know where you were looking. There are details you never consciously created. The texture of the walls, the sound of something distant, the quiet sense that you had been there. And the strangest part is not the memory itself. It's the certainty that comes with it. You don't question it at first. You don't ask when it happened. You don't ask how it happened, because it doesn't feel unfamiliar. It feels recognized. It feels like something that already belongs to you, even if you cannot place it anywhere in your life, even if you cannot connect it to any moment you remember living. It feels like a fragment of something real, something that occurred, something that left an impression strong enough to remain. And yet there is no timeline that contains it, no event you can point to, no moment where you know it began. It exists without origin, without context, without explanation. And once it appears, it doesn't leave. It stays with you, unchanged, unaffected by doubt, as if it was never created at all, as if it was simply found. The first memory. It never begins with something dramatic. There is no shock, no interruption, no clear dividing line between before and after. It begins quietly, so quietly that most people don't even realize when it happens for the first time. You are doing something ordinary, walking, sitting, waiting. Your attention is not focused on anything important. Your mind is not searching for anything. There is no reason for anything unusual to occur. And then, without effort, something appears, not in front of your eyes, but behind them. A place, not imagined, not constructed piece by piece. It does not assemble itself slowly like a daydream. It arrives whole, complete, already finished. You are standing somewhere. You don't see yourself from the outside. You see it from where you were, from inside your own body. Your perspective is fixed in a specific position, facing a specific direction. You know where you are, or at least you feel like you do. There is a room, not a vague room, not a symbolic one, a real room with structure, with boundaries, with weight. You can see the walls. Their color is not random. It is specific, stable, consistent every time you recall it. There is a window, not just the idea of a window, but its exact shape, its exact position, the way the frame divides the outside light into clean, geometric sections. You remember the light most clearly, the angle of it, the softness of it, the way it stretched across the floor and stopped exactly where it did. You remember where you were standing in relation to that light. Not approximately, exactly. You know how far you were from the window. You know which direction you were facing. You know what was behind you, even if you never turned around. And there is something else, a feeling. Not an emotion like fear or happiness, something quieter, something more neutral. Presence, the sense that you were there. Fully there, not observing, not imagining, existing. At first you accept it without resistance, because nothing about it feels artificial. It does not feel like creativity. It does not feel like invention. It feels like recognition, like remembering something that was always waiting to be remembered. You assume it must belong somewhere in your past. You begin to search for it. You try to connect it to a real place you have visited. A hotel room maybe, a building you entered once and forgot, a location from childhood. But the more you search, the more something becomes clear. There is no match. No matter how far back you look, there is no moment where you can confirm that you were ever there. And yet, the memory does not weaken. It does not fade like imagination usually does. Imagined places collapse under examination. Their details shift. Their structure becomes unstable. This does not. It remains fixed. Every detail exactly the same. Every time. You can leave it alone for days, weeks, even years. And when it returns, nothing has changed. The light still falls at the same angle. The walls still hold the same color. You are still standing in the same place. It has not degraded. It has not rewritten itself. It has not behaved like something created by the mind. It behaves like something recorded. This is the moment when people begin to notice the difference, because real memories feel like this. They carry stability. They resist alteration. They exist independently of your effort. But this creates a problem, because you have no memory of arriving there, no memory of leaving, no memory of the moments that should exist before or after. There is only the fragment itself, self-contained, isolated, complete, like a single frame removed from a longer sequence. You begin to question yourself. Maybe you forgot. Maybe it happened during a time you weren't paying attention. Maybe it was too insignificant to remember fully. But this explanation doesn't hold, because insignificant moments do not leave impressions like this. They do not preserve this level of detail. They do not remain this clear, this stable, this immune to time. And there is something else, something even harder to explain. The memory does not feel old. It does not feel distant. It feels present. Not present in time, present in accessibility, as if it exists somewhere you can still reach, somewhere unchanged, waiting, not decaying like normal memories do, not dissolving into abstraction, but remaining intact, permanent. And eventually a question begins to form, not loudly, not urgently, quietly. If this is a memory, when did it happen? You search again. You examine your life more carefully. You look for evidence, photographs, messages, any confirmation that you were ever in a place like that. But there is nothing, no trace, no proof, no external record that the moment ever existed. Only the memory itself, unaffected, untouched, certain. And this is when the first doubt appears. Not doubt about the place, not doubt about the details, doubt about the sequence. Because memory is supposed to follow experience. It is supposed to be created by events. It is supposed to depend on something happening first. But this memory does not feel like the result of something. It feels like the source, as if it exists independently, as if it does not need a past to justify its presence, as if it was never formed at all, only discovered. And once that possibility enters your mind, it becomes impossible to completely ignore, because you are left with something that should not exist, a memory with no origin, a record with no event, a place you remember clearly that you have never been. Confirmation. At first, you try to ignore it, not because it disappears, but because there is nothing else you can do. A memory without context does not give you instructions. It does not tell you where to look or what it means. It simply exists, repeating itself whenever your attention drifts close enough to it. Most people choose the simplest explanation. They assume they forgot. They assume it was a place they passed through once, briefly, without importance. A waiting room, a hallway, a building entered for only a few seconds before being abandoned by attention and eventually by conscious recall. This explanation feels safe. It preserves the structure of reality. It keeps memory where it belongs, behind you. But safety does not always survive verification, because eventually curiosity becomes stronger than dismissal. Eventually you try to find it. Not intentionally at first. You notice similarities in the real world. A window that resembles the one you remember. A wall with the same color. A hallway with the same proportions. These moments create small disturbances in your certainty. Not confirmation, but possibility. And possibility is enough. You begin to search more deliberately. You revisit places you have already been. Buildings from your past, locations connected to fragments of your life. You pay attention to details you would normally ignore. Angles, distances, light. You compare what you see with what you remember. Most of the time, it doesn't match. Something is always wrong. The window is too large. The hallway is too narrow. The light falls at the wrong angle. Close but not correct. Similar but not identical. And similarity is not enough, because the memory is precise. It does not allow approximation. It does not tolerate error. It waits for something exact. And then sometimes you find it, not gradually, not through interpretation, instantly. You turn a corner or enter a room or look through a doorway, and there it is. Not similar, not familiar, identical. Every measurement aligns, every distance matches. The walls hold the exact color you remember. The window exists in the precise position your memory preserved. Even the light behaves the same way, falling across the space at the same angle, stopping at the same invisible boundary. You do not need to compare. You do not need to think. Recognition happens before analysis, before logic, before doubt. Your body knows it first. There is a stillness that wasn't there before, a quiet pause inside your perception, because something impossible has just become real. You are standing inside a place you remember, a place you have never visited. You remain still longer than necessary. You observe details carefully, searching for differences, any difference, any flaw that would allow reality to correct itself. But nothing changes. The memory and the present overlap perfectly. Two separate origins, one identical result. This is the moment confirmation begins. Not confirmation that the memory was imagined, confirmation that it was accurate. And accuracy creates new questions, because accuracy requires a source. Memory does not invent precision without experience. It does not construct exact spatial relationships without reference. It does not preserve environments that were never perceived. And yet here you are, inside one. You begin to test it. You move slowly, deliberately, comparing your memory to your surroundings. You look toward the window. It is exactly where you knew it would be. You turn slightly, facing the direction you remember facing. The perspective aligns. The proportions remain consistent. Even the feeling of standing there, the quiet sense of position and orientation, matches what you remember. There is no adjustment required, no correction. Reality has not contradicted the memory. It has confirmed it. This is when the second realization appears. Not only does the place exist, it exists independently of you. It was always here, unchanged, unaffected by whether you remembered it or not, which means your memory did not create it. It discovered it. But this leads to a problem that cannot be ignored. If you remember this place accurately, when did you see it? You search your past again, more urgently now. You examine your timelines, your movements, your routines. You look for any moment where you could have entered this location, any opportunity, any overlap, but there is nothing. No reason you would have been here, no record of your presence, no conscious recollection of arrival, only the memory itself, and the present confirmation that it was real. This is when people begin to look for external proof, not memory, evidence. They check their phones, location history, messages, photographs, anything that might confirm they were here before. But there is no trace, no photograph taken in this place, no message sent from this location, no digital record marking your presence. Nothing connects you to it, except recognition. And recognition alone is not supposed to be enough. Because recognition implies familiarity, and familiarity requires prior contact. But there is no prior contact, only certainty. And certainty without origin is difficult to accept. So you test something else. You ask other people, casually, indirectly. You ask if they have ever seen you here before, if they remember you visiting this place, if your presence would have been noticed. Their answers are simple, consistent. They don't remember. They have never seen you here. As far as they know, this is your first time. And according to everything that can be proven, they are correct. This is your first time, and yet it isn't, because you remember it. Not vaguely, not partially, completely. You remember standing here. You remember seeing this. You remember existing in this exact position before now, before this moment, before confirmation. And that creates a contradiction. Two truths that cannot both be correct. You have never been here, and you remember being here. Reality supports the first. Your memory supports the second. Neither one weakens, neither one disappears. They coexist, and you are forced to stand between them, experiencing both, unable to fully reject either one. This is the moment when the question changes. It is no longer about whether the memory is real. Reality has already answered that. The place exists. The details were correct. The accuracy has been confirmed. The question is no longer about the place. It is about you. Because confirmation does not explain origin. It only removes doubt. And once doubt is removed, something else takes its place. Not certainty, not understanding, but something quieter, something more unsettling. The realization that you knew something before you had any way to know it. And there is no mechanism in your understanding of reality that explains how that is possible. No process that allows memory to form without experience. No structure that allows recall without perception. And yet it happened. It already happened. It is happening now. You stand inside a place that proves it, a place your mind recognized before your body ever arrived, a place that existed in you before you existed in it. And confirmation does not resolve the mystery, it deepens it, because now you can no longer dismiss the memory as imagination. You can no longer reduce it to error. You can no longer pretend it was nothing. It was something. Something precise, something real, something that should not exist, but does. The pattern. At first, you believe it was an isolated incident, one memory without origin, one place without explanation, something unusual but ultimately meaningless, an error that happened once and would never repeat. This belief allows you to continue normally. It allows reality to remain stable, predictable, safe, because a single anomaly can be dismissed. A single contradiction can be ignored. It can be placed outside the structure of your understanding and left there, disconnected from everything else. But then it happens again, not in the same place, not with the same details, but with the same certainty. Another memory appears, complete, precise, unattached to anything you remember living, and you recognize it immediately, not the content but the feeling, the same stability, the same resistance to doubt, the same quiet confidence that this is not imagination. You try to treat it the same way you treated the first one. You ignore it, you dismiss it, you tell yourself it means nothing, but this time dismissal is more difficult, because now there are two memories with no origin, two fragments of experience that exist without events. And once there are two, something begins to form between them, not a connection, a pattern. Patterns do not announce themselves. They emerge slowly through repetition, through consistency, through the quiet accumulation of things that should not repeat but do. You begin to notice similarities, not in what the memories contain, but in how they behave. They do not arrive gradually. They appear all at once, fully formed. They do not feel unstable. They do not distort or degrade over time. They remain fixed, permanent, unaffected by how often you examine them. Normal imagination does not behave like this. Imagined places lose detail when revisited. Their structure weakens, their boundaries blur, they collapse under scrutiny. But these memories do not collapse. They remain intact, every time, as if they are not being recreated, as if they are being accessed. This difference becomes impossible to ignore, because imagination depends on effort. It requires participation. These memories do not. They arrive without invitation. They exist without maintenance. They persist without reinforcement, as if they are stored somewhere outside your control. And then you notice something else. They do not change. No matter how much time passes, they remain identical. Normal memories degrade. They lose precision. They adapt. They rewrite themselves subtly, influenced by new experiences and new interpretations. But these memories resist that process. They remain frozen, untouched by time, untouched by reinterpretation, untouched by doubt, as if they were never integrated into the normal structure of memory at all, as if they exist separately, independent. This is when the pattern becomes undeniable, not because of what the memories show, but because of what they refuse to do. They refuse to fade. They refuse to distort. They refuse to behave like memories created by the brain. They behave like records, static, stable, final. And records imply something else. They imply that something was recorded. But you cannot find the moment when it happened. You cannot locate the origin. You cannot identify the experience that created them, which leaves only two possibilities. Either your mind is capable of producing perfect records of places and moments it has never experienced, or these records came from somewhere else, somewhere outside the sequence you remember living. This possibility changes how you observe them. You stop asking what they show. You start asking when they appear. And that is when the deeper pattern reveals itself. They do not appear randomly. They appear during transitions, moments where your attention is unfocused, moments between decisions, moments where nothing significant is happening, when you are waiting, when you are still, when your mind is not occupied. They arrive in the spaces between intention and action, as if they require silence to be noticed, as if they were always there but only visible when nothing else competes with them. This creates a disturbing implication. They are not being created in those moments. They are being revealed. And revelation implies prior existence. Something cannot be revealed unless it already exists, which means these memories were already present before you became aware of them, waiting, unobserved. You begin to wonder how many have appeared without you noticing. How many fragments exist beneath conscious awareness? How much of your internal landscape is made of things you never experienced? This question leads to another realization. These memories do not feel connected to your identity. They feel personal, but not authored. They feel like something you inherited, not something you created. You recognize the perspective. You recognize the position of your body, but there is a subtle distance, a quiet separation between you and the origin of the memory, as if the memory belongs to your perspective, but not to your timeline. This is the moment the pattern becomes more than repetition. It becomes structure, because patterns do not exist without rules, and rules imply systems, and systems imply design. Not intentional design, but functional design. Something operating consistently, something following principles, something producing results. You begin to notice that each memory is complete. None of them are partial. None of them are fragments of fragments. Each one is a self-contained moment, a fully preserved instance with clear spatial relationships, clear sensory detail, clear perspective. They do not require reconstruction. They do not require interpretation. They exist in finished form. This is not how imagination behaves. This is not how incomplete information behaves. This is how recordings behave. And recordings have one defining property. They do not depend on the present to remain accurate. They remain true to the moment they captured, even after that moment is gone. Which raises a question that becomes harder to avoid. If these are recordings, what created them? Because recording requires observation. It requires presence. It requires something to exist at the moment the record was formed. And if something existed there, why don't you remember being it? Why do you only remember the result and not the experience itself? This contradiction repeats itself with every new memory. Each one reinforces the same structure. Each one strengthens the same pattern, until eventually denial becomes impossible. Because coincidence cannot produce consistency. Error cannot produce stability. Imagination cannot produce permanence without effort. But this process continues, quietly, relentlessly. More memories appear. Not constantly, not frequently enough to feel predictable, but frequently enough to establish certainty. This is not random. This is not accidental. This is something that happens, something that has been happening, something that may have always been happening, long before you noticed it, long before you questioned it, long before you understood what it might mean. The pattern does not explain itself. It does not announce its purpose. It does not offer interpretation. It simply continues, producing memories without events, records without origins, certainty without cause. And with each repetition, one possibility becomes more difficult to dismiss: that these memories are not anomalies. They are not errors. They are not exceptions. They are part of something, something larger, something structured, something consistent, something that does not require your understanding to continue existing, something that does not require your permission to continue happening. And the most unsettling part is not that the pattern exists, it is that you do not know when it started, or how many memories are already waiting, unnoticed, unquestioned, unclaimed, already inside you, part of a pattern you did not create, but are somehow continuing. The delay. At first, the memories only pointed backward. They referred to places you could not place, moments you could not confirm, fragments of experience that seemed disconnected from everything you had consciously lived. That alone was enough to disturb the structure of certainty. But eventually, something changed. The direction shifted. Not immediately, not obviously. The pattern did not announce its evolution. It revealed it slowly, through a difference so subtle it was easy to dismiss at first, until it happened in a way that could no longer be ignored. It begins like the others, quietly, without warning. You are not searching for it. Your attention is somewhere else. Your mind is occupied with something ordinary, something insignificant, and then the memory appears. Not of a place this time, of a moment. You are standing somewhere familiar, somewhere you recognize from your daily life. A room you have entered many times before, a space that exists firmly within your known reality. But something is different. You are not remembering the room itself. You are remembering something that happens inside it. Someone else is there. You can see them clearly, their position, their posture, the exact distance between you. You know where you are standing in relation to them. You know the angle of your body. You know the direction of your gaze. And then they speak. You hear their voice. Not as imagination, not as possibility, as recollection. You know the words, not approximately. Exactly. You know what they say. You know how they say it. You know when they say it. And you know what happens after. The sequence is complete, self-contained, finished. You do not question it immediately because it feels like something that already happened. You assume it belongs to the past, a conversation you had and forgot, a moment too ordinary to preserve consciously. You accept it. You move on. And then later, it happens, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. You are standing in the same place, the same room, in the same position. The other person stands exactly where you remember them standing. There is no confusion, no ambiguity. You recognize the alignment instantly, a quiet internal recognition that arrives before anything else. And then they speak, the same words in the same order, with the same timing, the same pauses, the same tone. You do not react immediately because part of you already knows what comes next, not as expectation, as memory. You are not predicting their words, you are remembering them, even as they are being spoken. The moment unfolds exactly as you remember it. Every detail aligns, every element confirms itself, and when it ends exactly where your memory said it would. No deviation, no variation, no correction. Reality has followed the memory precisely. This is when something fundamental breaks, because memory is not supposed to work this way. Memory is a record, a consequence, an effect created by something that has already happened. It cannot exist before its cause. It cannot precede the event it records, and yet it did. You remembered the conversation before it happened, not vaguely, not symbolically, specifically, accurately, completely. This cannot be explained as prediction. Prediction contains uncertainty. Prediction contains approximation. Prediction allows for error. This contained none. It was exact. You did not imagine multiple possibilities. You remembered one, and reality conformed to it. This creates a delay, not a delay in memory, a delay in reality, a gap between when the memory exists and when the event occurs. At first, you try to rationalize it. You call it coincidence. You tell yourself the conversation was predictable, that you subconsciously anticipated it, that you reconstructed it in your mind, and later confused reconstruction with recall. But this explanation fails under examination, because anticipation is imperfect. It cannot reproduce exact phrasing. It cannot preserve precise timing. It cannot generate a complete and flawless sequence in advance. And yet, this was flawless. Every word, every pause, every detail, identical. You begin to notice it happening again, not constantly, not frequently enough to feel normal, but often enough to establish consistency. Another memory appears, another moment, another interaction, another sequence that feels like recollection. And later, reality repeats it perfectly. Again and again, the same structure emerges. Memory first, event second, cause after effect. This reverses the order you have always trusted, because memory is supposed to depend on reality. Reality is not supposed to depend on memory. And yet, reality appears to be following it, filling it in, completing something that already exists in your mind. As if the memory is not created by the event, but the event is created by the memory. This possibility is difficult to accept because it contradicts everything you understand about time. Time is supposed to move forward. Experience is supposed to create memory. Memory is supposed to follow experience, not precede it, not guide it, not exist independently of it. But the delay proves something else. There is a separation between memory and occurrence, a measurable distance between knowing and happening, a gap where memory exists alone, complete, finished, waiting, and then later, reality arrives to match it. This changes how you experience the present, because the present no longer feels entirely new. It feels like confirmation, like something you have already encountered, something you are encountering again, not for the first time, but for the second, even though logic insists it is the first. This creates a quiet disorientation, not confusion, not panic, something subtler, a loss of certainty about sequence. You begin to question which comes first, the experience or the memory of it. You begin to wonder how many moments in your life have followed this pattern without you noticing. How many times reality has repeated something you already knew. How many times the present has simply fulfilled something that was already waiting. This leads to an even more unsettling realization. The memory never changes to match reality. Reality changes to match the memory, because the memory arrives complete, final, perfect. Reality never corrects it. Reality never contradicts it. Reality completes it. This suggests something impossible, that the memory is not a reflection of reality, but a template. Something reality follows, something reality fills, something reality completes after the fact. This reverses the structure of cause and effect. It suggests that what you remember may not come from what happened. It suggests that what happens may come from what you remember. This possibility remains quiet. It does not demand belief. It does not force acceptance. It simply exists, waiting to be acknowledged. Because the delay continues, more memories appear. More moments arrive later to match them, the same sequence repeating, the same structure reinforcing itself. Until eventually you are forced to confront something you cannot dismiss. You are remembering things that have not happened yet, not predicting them, not imagining them, remembering them. And when they happen, they do not feel new. They feel familiar. Not because they resemble something, but because they are something. Something you have already experienced, somewhere, somewhen, before now. Before reality caught up, before the delay ended. And each time the delay closes, each time reality fulfills another memory, the same question becomes harder to ignore. Not whether the memory was real, but why it existed first, why it waited, why it appeared early, as if it did not depend on the future to exist, as if it came from somewhere else, somewhere beyond the sequence you are currently living, somewhere that already knows what happens next and leaves the memory behind, waiting for reality to arrive. The displacement. At first, the delay feels like an anomaly, a disruption in sequence, something rare, something isolated, a temporary instability in an otherwise stable structure. But over time, the delay stops feeling like an exception. It begins to feel like a rule, not because it happens constantly, but because it happens consistently enough to force a new question, not about when memory forms, but about where it forms. Because if memory can exist before the event it describes, then it cannot originate from that event. It cannot be created by something that has not happened yet, which means it must come from somewhere else, somewhere outside the moment it appears in. This realization creates a subtle shift in perception, not in what you see, not in what you hear, but in how you locate yourself within experience. You begin to notice something that was always there, but never examined. The present moment does not feel as stable as it once did, not because it changes, but because it feels like it is being aligned, corrected, adjusted into place, as if the present is not creating itself, as if it is being matched to something that already exists, something that arrived earlier, something internal, something silent, the memory. You begin to experience moments with a strange duality. There is the moment as it happens, and there is the memory of the moment, already there, waiting, not forming, not emerging, existing, before the moment completes itself. This creates a displacement, not in space, not in physical position, but in sequence. Your memory is no longer located safely behind you. It no longer belongs exclusively to your past. It exists beside the present, sometimes ahead of it. This destroys the assumption you have always trusted, that memory is evidence of where you have been, because now memory appears to be evidence of where you are going. Or worse, evidence of something that has already happened, but not here, not in this version of events. This possibility does not arrive dramatically. It emerges quietly, through repetition, through the quiet accumulation of moments that should not exist but do. You begin to notice how the present behaves differently after a memory appears, not externally, internally. There is less uncertainty, less unpredictability, not because you consciously know what will happen, but because part of you already does, a part of you that is not guessing, not predicting, remembering. You find yourself waiting for things you cannot explain, anticipating words you have not yet heard, recognizing positions you have not yet seen. Not through effort, through familiarity. The familiarity arrives first. The event arrives second. This reverses the natural order of experience, and once reversed, it becomes impossible to fully restore. Because you have seen what happens when memory leads. You have experienced reality following behind it, filling its shape, completing its outline. This creates a growing distance between you and the present moment. Not physically, structurally. You begin to feel like you are not entirely inside the moment as it happens. Part of you is already beyond it, already past it, already remembering it. This is not dissociation. It is not detachment. It is recognition without origin, recognition without arrival, as if you have been moved forward and backward at the same time, as if your position in time is no longer fixed. You begin to question something deeper, not where you are, but when you are. Because sequence is the only thing that allows experience to make sense. Cause, then effect, experience, then memory. This order creates continuity, it creates identity, it creates the feeling that you are moving through time in one direction. But displacement breaks that continuity. It separates memory from experience. It allows memory to exist independently, freely, untethered. And once untethered, it no longer confirms where you have been. It suggests something else, that your memory may not belong exclusively to this sequence, that it may not originate from this timeline, that it may be arriving from somewhere adjacent, somewhere parallel, somewhere structurally similar, but not identical. This idea feels impossible at first, because identity depends on continuity. You believe you are the result of your past. Your memories define you. They confirm your existence. They prove that you were there, that you experienced what you remember. But displacement introduces a contradiction. You now possess memories that cannot be placed within your personal history, memories that do not connect to your past, memories that appear before their cause, memories that reality eventually confirms but does not originate. This creates a quiet fracture in certainty, because if you can remember something before it happens, then the memory did not come from you, not the version of you that exists here, not the version of you that is moving forward through this sequence. It must come from somewhere else, somewhere that has already experienced it, somewhere that has already completed the moment you are approaching. This leads to an unsettling possibility. That memory is not always a record of your past. Sometimes it is a record of someone else's past, someone whose experience aligns perfectly with yours, someone whose perspective matches your own, someone whose position in reality overlaps with where you are now, someone who is you, but not here, not now, not anymore. This possibility cannot be proven, but it also cannot be dismissed, because the displacement continues. More memories appear, more moments follow them. Reality continues to fulfill what memory already contains. The sequence continues to repeat, memory first, reality second, again and again, until eventually the present moment begins to feel less like an origin and more like an intersection, a place where something arrives, a place where something is completed, a place where something that already existed finally becomes visible. You begin to realize that you are no longer certain which version of an event is the original, the memory or the experience, because the memory exists independently. It does not require the present to validate it. It waits, complete, stable, certain, and when the present arrives, it does not create the memory. It confirms it. This means the present is no longer the source of experience. It is the receiver, the place where something already formed becomes real. This is displacement, not movement through space, not movement through time, movement through sequence. A separation between where you are and where your memories come from. A separation between the version of you that remembers and the version of you that experiences. And once that separation exists, it cannot be undone, because you can no longer trust that your memories belong to this version of you. You can no longer assume that your past defines your present. You can no longer be certain that what you remember actually happened here. You are left with only one certainty. The memory exists, the event follows, and you are standing in the space between them, not at the beginning, not at the end, but in the displacement where something that already happened somewhere else is still arriving. The possibility. Once the pattern is recognized, and once the delay can no longer be denied, there is only one direction left for the question to go. Not backward, not toward explanation, but outward, toward possibility. Because patterns without explanation do not remain neutral. They create pressure, they force interpretation, they demand structure, not because you want answers, but because without structure, the experience itself becomes unstable. You are left holding something that behaves like memory, but does not follow the rules. Memory is supposed to obey. It exists without origin. It arrives without cause. It precedes the events it describes, and it remains accurate even when reality has not yet caught up. This leaves you with only two possibilities. The first is the simplest. Your mind is creating these memories on its own. Perfectly, flawlessly, producing complete records of events that have never happened, constructing environments with precise spatial detail, generating conversations with exact wording, simulating reality so accurately that when reality eventually unfolds, it aligns perfectly with what your mind created. This explanation preserves the structure of reality. It keeps everything contained within you. It suggests that the brain is more powerful than you realized, that it can simulate entire moments without reference, that it can produce certainty without experience. But this explanation contains a problem. Simulation is imperfect. Imagination contains instability. Constructed memories degrade over time. They shift, they weaken, they lose precision, they adapt unconsciously. But these memories do not. They remain fixed, permanent, untouched, unaffected by doubt, time, or reinterpretation. They do not behave like creations. They behave like discoveries, which leads to the second possibility. These memories are real. Not real in the sense that they happened here, but real in the sense that they happened somewhere. Somewhere structurally identical. Somewhere aligned with your perspective. Somewhere that followed the same sequence, until it didn't. This possibility introduces something far more unsettling. That memory may not be confined to a single continuous experience. That memory may not belong exclusively to the version of you that exists now. Because memory, at its core, is information. Information does not require a body to exist. It requires only structure, only preservation, only continuity. If structure can repeat, if sequences can resemble each other closely enough, then information may not remain isolated. It may transfer, not intentionally, not consciously, but naturally, through alignment, through overlap, through similarity so precise that separation becomes meaningless. This suggests that the memories you experience may not originate from imagination. They may originate from experience, just not yours, not this version of yours, not this sequence, but another, one that followed the same path, one that stood in the same places, one that faced the same moments, one that reached the same intersections but did not continue the same way. Because every decision creates divergence. Every moment creates variation. Every sequence contains alternatives that do not survive, possibilities that do not continue, outcomes that do not persist, but their structure existed, their moments occurred, their experiences were real, within their own sequence, and if those sequences align closely enough, if their structure overlaps with yours, then their memories may not remain isolated. They may persist, not as events, but as information. And information, once formed, does not require the original sequence to continue existing. It requires only something capable of holding it, something structurally compatible, something identical enough to receive it. You. This creates a new interpretation of the delay. The memory did not appear early. It arrived on time. It arrived from a sequence where the event had already happened. It existed there first. It was recorded there first. And what you experience now is not prediction, but inheritance. You are not remembering your future. You are remembering someone else's past. Someone whose perspective matches your own. Someone whose position in reality overlaps perfectly with where you are now. Someone whose experience became information and whose information remained long enough to reach you. This explains why the memory feels stable, why it resists distortion, why it does not behave like imagination, because it was never imagined. It was experienced, just not here. This also explains the displacement, why the present feels like confirmation, why reality appears to fulfill something that already exists. Because from the perspective of the memory, it already has. It is not waiting to happen. It already happened. You are the one arriving late. You are the one moving into alignment with something that was completed elsewhere. This possibility changes the nature of identity itself, because identity depends on continuity. It depends on the belief that your memories belong exclusively to you, that they were formed by your experience, that they define your existence. But if you can receive memories from elsewhere, then memory is no longer proof of personal history. It is proof of structural similarity, proof that you exist in alignment with something that existed before, something close enough to you to transfer its experience, something identical enough to you to become indistinguishable. This means you may not be the origin of everything you remember. You may be the continuation, the inheritor, the receiver, not the first version, but the next one. And the memories you carry may not be warnings. They may not be predictions. They may not be errors. They may be remnants, fragments of sequences that did not continue, except through you, possibilities that ended, except in memory. And memory, once formed, does not care which version of you carries it forward. It persists. It survives. It waits until it finds a place where it fits again. A place where the structure aligns. A place where the sequence resumes. A place where someone stands in the exact position required to remember. You. Not because you created the memory, but because you are able to hold it. Because you are close enough. Because you are similar enough. Because you are not separate from the possibility. You are its continuation. The final observation. By the time you reach this point, the question is no longer whether it is happening. It is. The pattern has repeated too many times. The delay has occurred too precisely. The confirmations have aligned too perfectly to dismiss. The memories exist. They appear without origin. They remain without distortion. They precede events that later unfold exactly as remembered. This is no longer speculation. It is observation. And observation changes everything, because observation is the only thing that makes experience real. Without observation, nothing can be confirmed. Nothing can be distinguished from imagination. Nothing can be separated from possibility. But you observed it. You experienced the moment where memory existed first. You stood inside the delay. You witnessed reality arriving second. And once something has been observed, it cannot return to uncertainty. It cannot return to being hypothetical. It becomes part of the structure you exist within. This forces a final shift in perspective, not about memory, not about time, about you, because every memory you have ever trusted has served one purpose: to prove continuity, to prove that you were there, to prove that the version of you that exists now is the direct result of everything that came before. Memory creates identity. It creates the illusion of a single, unbroken line moving forward. A sequence that begins in the past and extends into the present. A structure that defines who you are. But now that structure has been interrupted. You have memories that do not belong to your past. Memories that do not originate from your personal experience. Memories that arrive independently. Memories that reality eventually confirms, but does not create. This creates a contradiction that cannot be resolved within the normal understanding of identity. Because identity assumes ownership of memory. It assumes that what you remember belongs to you. But ownership requires origin, and these memories have none. They exist without evidence of creation, without proof of formation, without connection to any moment you can locate in your personal history. They exist inside you, but they do not belong to the sequence you remember living. This leads to the final observation. Memory does not prove that you experienced something. It only proves that the information exists. It proves that the structure was formed, but it does not prove where. It does not prove when. It does not prove which version of you created it. This means your memory may not be evidence of your past. It may be evidence of continuity beyond it, evidence that something existed before you and continued through you, evidence that you are not the origin of every moment you remember. You are the point where those moments became visible again. This explains why the memories never feel foreign. They feel familiar because they are aligned with you. They match your perspective perfectly. They match your position perfectly. They match your awareness perfectly. Not because you created them, but because you are compatible with them. Because you are positioned exactly where those memories belong. This raises one final question. Not about memory, not about time, not about reality, about observation itself. Because observation is the only thing that separates existence from possibility. Something that is not observed remains undefined. It remains potential, unfixed. But once observed, it becomes real. It becomes part of sequence, part of structure, part of continuity. Which means these memories, once observed, did not simply appear. They were integrated. They became part of you, part of your identity, part of your continuity. Even if they did not originate here, even if they were formed somewhere else, even if they belong to a sequence that ended, you carry them now. You complete them now. You are the point where they continue. This means the version of you that exists now may not be the first to stand here, not the first to see this moment, not the first to experience this exact sequence. You may be the continuation of something that already reached this point once before, something that ended and resumed through you, and the only evidence it ever existed is the memory it left behind, not as proof, not as warning, not as prediction, but as confirmation. Confirmation that this moment, this exact moment, has already been observed, and now, through you, it is being observed again. Closing. There is nothing left to confirm, not because the questions have been answered, but because confirmation was never the point. You were never meant to prove where the memories came from. You were only meant to notice that they existed, that they appeared without permission, that they remained without explanation, and that reality eventually followed them. You may still try to hold on to the structure you trusted before, the belief that memory follows experience, that time moves in one direction, that every moment begins when it happens. But you have already seen something that does not obey that order. You have already experienced the delay. You have already stood inside a moment that your memory reached first. And once that has happened, something changes permanently. Not in the world, in certainty. Because certainty depends on sequence. It depends on knowing where things begin, where they originate, where they belong. But these memories do not belong to any origin you can find. They exist independently, complete, stable, waiting. And now they exist inside you, not as questions, as structure, part of how you perceive, part of how you recognize, part of how you move forward, even when forward no longer feels entirely new. This leaves only one possibility. Not that you are remembering the future, not that you are predicting what comes next, but that you are continuing something, something that does not begin where you think it does, something that does not end when you expect it to, something that leaves behind fragments and resumes through whoever can hold them. You do not need to understand it. You do not need to control it. You do not need to explain it, because it will continue whether you accept it or not. The memories will appear, the moments will follow, the sequence will complete itself, quietly, naturally, inevitably, and somewhere ahead, or somewhere behind, another version of you may already remember this moment, already standing here, already reaching the same realization, already leaving this memory behind, waiting for you to arrive, waiting for you to recognize it, waiting for you to understand that this was never the beginning, only the point where you became aware of it. And now that you are, the sequence continues, with you.
Shadows grow where the light won't go. A silent wind, it starts to grow.